So yeah, thanks for having me. I figured kind of a good way to set the stage for everybody. I don't want to bore anybody with kind of, overall industry trends, but I wanted to call out a couple specific kind of trends, and more so, these aren't going to be surprising to anybody, especially, I looked at everyone that's attending today, but I more so wanted to talk about like, how is this more, evolving into conversations and what, particularly on the business side of the house, how customers are trying to really navigate these things, right? So first and foremost, consumer data privacy. And I always kind of joke around, depending on what region you are in the world, right? Globally, everybody's favorite acronym, right? GDPR, CCPA. But, our customers are really in a position where they require more kind of governance and security around their data. And so how that really translates in the kind of Snowflake world is customers really leaning into the concept of data sharing and data collaboration and being able to leverage technology today that enables them to do data sharing and data collaboration without actually having to physically copy and move their data. So any of those that are really familiar with Snowflake, that's something that we say probably a lot each day. I know I find myself saying that. And I think that's just because of the concept of data sharing and the Snowflake environment without actually having to physically copy and move is still kind of a new concept in general. And even some of our kind of longer term customers I see going through like different maturations on Snowflake are, at that kind of tipping point now where they're just really using things like data sharing on Snowflake, not only internally, but also externally. The next one is, of course, I'd be remiss if we didn't talk about, cookie deprecation and all, but identity obviously is all trending for all of our customers today. And really, we know what's coming. We have a lot of different customers in different parts of their journey, trying to navigate what the future cookieless world looks like. But what it's really doing, I think at the end of the day, is just putting further emphasis on a first-party data strategy. And we're talking, different realms of customers that have a lot of first-party data, as well as a lot of customers that are maybe a little bit behind the ball on a first-party data strategy. And they're really working closely to build up that first-party data strategy. And really what that means from my view is, what is that kind of value exchange between them and their customers to actually capture first-party data? And then the last one, just kind of given, news this past year and even already into FY22 is consolidation, right? We've heard some major kind of blockbuster acquisitions. Just most recently, I have to be remiss if I didn't bring it up, is kind of Microsoft's continued acquisition with, the news of Activision Blizzard. But, earlier last year or mid-year, I guess, was AT&T announcing, them merging their media business with Discovery. And of course, that really plays into kind of the streaming wars. Amazon buying MGM Studios, really, we kind of knew that was coming with kind of the walled gardens getting into content. Some other ones that are pretty notable is like Verizon, selling Oath, once known again as Yahoo, to a PE firm. And then I already talked about Microsoft, but they've been on a spree with obviously Xandr prior to the news of Activision. So definitely kind of reshaping the landscape quite a bit. Next. So I want to talk about, thinking about DOS 42, and one of the demos from today was around subscriber analytics for those that were able to tune in on that demo. But why subscriber analytics is so critical. And I wanted to just pull out a couple stats that I pull out that I thought were super interesting. First is really kind of all of us as consumers get to benefit from what they're calling like this golden age of content, right? And the amount of dollars that are getting invested from, publishers on content to essentially, draw in the eyeballs, right? The impressions. So basically in 2021, I think content topped 220 billion in investment in content. And that was, a 14% or looking to be 14% growth over this next year, 230 billion for 2022. And probably no surprise, right? Most of those investment dollars are actually being driven directly from the subscription streaming services in those platforms. And when you look at just some of the largest platforms, like Netflix, Disney, Warner Media, they've all vowed very large investments. And really what they're doing is they're promoting to us as subscribers the great content that they're going to be bringing forth. I think Warner Media in particular came out and said something like they were going to invest 18 billion alone just in content in 2022. Again, me as a subscriber of, I think I have 6 different subscriptions in my home, we all get to benefit from this, but there really is a true kind of streamer war kind of going on out there. The next is overall subscriber growth, right? So it's estimated, I think by 2 billion active subscriptions to video on demand by 2025. So it's a 65% increase just from when they started tracking this in 2020. So the growth, of course, is probably not surprising to any of us on this call, especially if you look at the subscriptions you've probably brought into your home over the last couple of years. But it's just really interesting. I think the US average household was like 3.4 services per household. Again, my house, I'm close to double that, with 6. And then the last piece, you can't really talk about subscription growth without really taking a moment to talk about, churn, right? Or the retention issue. So it's predicted that, more than 150 million people will cancel a paid subscription service in 2022. So it's kind of a roughly global churn rate of 30%. And I think that last piece is what's so critical when you combine it with streaming wars and why subscriber analytics is just going to be really key for media providers and producers of content in the coming years. Next. So that was really to kind of set up the stage here and talk about a little bit more, or a lot more, I should say, about DOS 42. And Ben, if you want to kind of jump in here from here.
Awesome. Thanks, Adrian. Hi, everybody. I was going through the attendee list earlier, and definitely some new names, but a bunch of folks that I know from before. So welcome, new friends and old. A little bit about DOS 42, put a little context. Snowflake has a bigger marketing budget than we do, so not everybody knows us. Founded in 2015, we really are sort of a data strategy consulting and implementation company. Data is really our thing, and really helping people make the most out of it across the organization. We're currently about 70 people across the US. We're all US based. We have very large plans for 2022. And so that number is going to shoot up, but as of we speak, about 70 people. We work across all industries. That said, media and entertainment and ad tech is, I think, the largest footprint of our business. And some of that, is just organic because the industry is, in terms of media and entertainment, data voracious. And part of that's just relationships too, right? Like when we've done good work, there's a nice snowball effect there in that as we get known in one business and then people move elsewhere, we move with them. So a pretty large footprint there. The big sort of news for us in 2021 was a private equity investment of about $15 million from MC Partners up in Boston. If you are in the PE space, $15 million is a lot of money. I know that we've grown up in the venture capital space where that's a different scale, but it really gives us a lot of oxygen now to grow in the way that we see a real opportunity as the data space is itself exploding, and we'd like to think that we have something unique to bring to the table as well. Which really brings us to the last point: is the thing that really makes us different and special is this full stack philosophy that Nick originated many years ago and has really become sort of the cornerstone of the way we think, the way we train, the way we hire, and the way we operate. I put a link in here. I think we'll share the deck later. So you can really go to the page and go to and see the details there and spend some time with it. But in essence, the theory, which we're proving out, is that, in many traditional companies, silos don't work. And when you say, I've got a business problem I need to solve, and somebody says, not it, that's a data engineering problem, or not it, that's an analytics problem, you're really often getting an inferior solution to that. And when you have a team that knows across the sort of spectrum of solutions, and they know that there's several routes to maybe solving that, that gives them an opportunity to solve it optimally. Then when you're surrounded with a whole group of people that are thinking and acting this way, there's a multiplication effect that kicks in. As I said before, we've got many, many long-term customers that are a testament to that unique approach that we're taking, and is really fueling a lot of that growth. A little bit about the relationship between Snowflake and DOS. Pretty early on to the game, I think, again, like a testament to Nick and his vision, saw that Snowflake was really different, right? Like having worked through lots of different applications over time, all of them being kind of evolutionary, not so revolutionary, and in getting excited and establishing some of those relationships and doing some of those early projects has definitely given us a bit of a pole position. So really early partners. We've achieved elite status in 2020. That's 2 years ago. We maintain that status, and that status is driven in part by project size, and there is a commercial aspect to it as well. We're very work very closely with Snowflake, and we're very proud of being a Snowflake Media Data Cloud partner. That is not a long list of folks, and we again sort of a testament to us punching well above our weight. 2/3 of our team on the consulting team have certification. We're going to keep pushing that number northward to 100% eventually. But the vast majority of folks are certified, and everybody is certainly hands-on with that. And then, as we were mentioning before, most of our projects have Snowflake at this point as some part of it. Sometimes the project is Snowflake front and center, and other things are ancillary. Sometimes it's really a wing-to-wing implementation, but there's Snowflake everywhere we're working these days. Okay, let's move on. So I've collected some thoughts here that hopefully are kind of the nexus of media and Snowflake, and certainly the Media Data Cloud. And so, hopefully they string together. It looks backwards first, and then we look forward. So historically, in projects I've worked on, and certainly, as Nick noted, I've been in media since 1995, for better or for worse. And the idea of sharing data isn't new at all, right? But there's a lot of the whichever side of the line you were sitting on, like, yeah, I'd love to partner up more. Let's be better partners. Oh, data, absolutely. Well, I don't think I have permission to do that, but if you're willing to share your data with us, maybe we can do something. And it's been sort of a standoff since the beginning of this idea. And so, bring this new technology to the fore, where we have the ability to answer everybody's concerns about what might be shared and how it's used, takes that off the table entirely. Other comments on I'm not going to really do much for you on the sort of next round of this campaign. Not sure if it worked, and the data I have doesn't really tell a compelling story internally. So here we're at. And I've heard this a million times too. We wish you could provide a higher level of services. I've most of my time's been on the media side, not spent some time on ad tech, but most of it's on media side. And I've worked with the buy side a bit, but I'm a very pub guy. Media producers, we're killing ourselves, and so you want a higher level service? Okay, then that would have to break the mold, because we're already working really hard on your behalf. Again, Media Data Cloud really begins to change the dynamic on that. So, yep. All right, next. Another perspective on this is that all these media, data, and entertainment companies that we've worked with for many years, and we're very proud of the work we've done, but a lot of it's been repeating very similar critical foundational elements to it. So I've got a big data set, and you pull them from Nielsen, or I got a big data set from an ad service like that. Everybody's doing that, and that's not necessarily that's table stakes. That's not a point of differentiation, and it's value add, but it's not a value add in any kind of unique way, right? And so many of these data sets are industry standards. Everybody uses them. It's just a question of how you use them. They're tools in many ways. So being able to like decrease or diminish the amount of effort it takes to like bring some of these canonical data sets in and work with it frees up lots of time to do much more interesting things than wrestling with a lot of sort of the traditional ELT routes to just getting to work with the data. And I think it's worth noting there's again, folks on the call come from some very large names with lots of resources, but not everybody's in that position. And at the large names I've worked with, they're just going to like make the investment and they're going to get the data and it's going to be painful and they're just going to do it. But there's a lot of folks out there that have to be very selective about where they deploy their resources and make their investments. And so that leaves them at a disadvantage when it's just too tough to do it. And again, I think that the Media Data Cloud really levels the playing field a little bit and makes things a lot more interesting about what everybody can do, assuming that they kind of plug into this and not have some of the sort of cost prohibitive barriers. Okay, next.
Ben, I was going to just chime in on that one real quick.
Yeah,
Earlier, just the pain. So, prior to joining Snowflake, I was at a company called Experian Marketing Services, which I'm sure most are very familiar with. And I think a lot of focus was on the wrong things when trying to bring in a new data set, right? And I think what Ben highlighted is really key, right? Making things frictionless and easier to actually access the data they need. Like a lot of the data providers that are in the Snowflake data marketplace today are already key partners a lot of our media companies were using, but we started to look at like the amount of time our media customers were spending on bringing in those data sets and just the lag time to send data out, get things resolved, get it enriched and sending back. We're talking weeks at a time, weeks. And it sounds so bizarre for those that have a little bit of a lens of ad tech that anything should take longer than a day, let alone maybe 15, 20 minutes. So just wanted to call that out, Ben.
Yeah, thank you. Appreciate that. And I think that all kind of gets back to a little bit of what does a modern data stack even look like, not that long ago. And I think there's still some mentality out there, which is, much more kind of archaic data pipelines, ETL, making a priori decisions early on to throw out data or pre-aggregate and leaving the business and the analysts like a little bit like with their hands tied behind their back, so they can only answer some questions sometimes. And I think the modern data stack is really meant to be about, keeping as much agility, in the mix as possible, so that as you're working through your business is dynamic. It's going to keep moving. And that if you're like, oh, I need a new data point, well, okay, I'll go back all the way and start servicing that data point. I wish and wow. You get all that sort of go forward data, historical data. How's that going to take you? A couple of weeks? Not too bad. What do you mean not too bad? And so this to me all fits in with that. Let's expand the palette of possibility so that people can move at the speed of business. So, anyways, M&E definitely moving to a subscription model. I've tried to keep this a little bit higher level than just pure OTT in streaming services. Certainly there's the paywall for any of those services. But I'm seeing in many, content producers, whether they're print or otherwise, are putting up some sort of reg wall where you may have some completely anonymous access, but fairly limited, and then greater access with you submit like an email or something equivalent. And the push is then to upsell you into an actual paying subscription. New York Times, Washington Post, these are all great examples of that. But these are changing times, and I think the value equation outside of pure data has already begun to change because of it. And so this also opens up opportunities, right? So if you're going to have this dynamic, are you going to manage it well or not? And you have the opportunity to capture that data, and you have the opportunity to really enhance that conversation and that value prop to that end user. And so across the board, this is a dynamic if you're producing content. When we have a lot of first-party data, historically often very inward looking. And I think more and more the idea is that, we're just not going to have a complete picture with internal data. So can we join it? And if we do join it, let's make that as easy as possible. I think Media Data Cloud and Clean Rooms does an amazing job of sorting that out for folks, and begin to tell a richer story. And then, maximizing sub behavior is central. It's central for your content user experience. It's also central for your ad targeting and whatever ad experience that you've designed for your end users. Okay, next. I think for a lot of what the Media Data Cloud is focused on, is a lot of what has been sort of e-commerce tactics, which media companies don't have as sort of part of their lineage, but circulation, which used to be a big deal, then it became a small deal, but probably people are not calling it circulation anymore. But that's essentially what we're doing, right? Except we're using modern tools behind that. And I've put up here propensity models, but really, a lot of the conversations around churn, how once we've captured these people, do we keep them? As you saw earlier, 30% churn is a big deal for any company, right? And so working to understand like the dynamics of that, and if there are some, evasive maneuvers that companies can employ to keep people, that's well worth the time and effort. And there's lots of different routes to that, but it's all data driven. I think ML and AI really is moving from a place where not too long ago, it was an experiment, and there's this sort of inductive, like, let the data tell us stuff. Then we moved a little bit further forward to a little bit more of content analytics and getting better kind of understanding what people are doing, what they like and don't like. But now we're moving to yet another phase where we're understanding user behavior in their interaction with us and loyalty. That's really going to work better with more data, right? If you're just sitting on top of your Google Analytics, or even if you have set-top box data or whatever, that's half a quarter of your story. When we start marrying it up with other data, those models just bloom, right? And so those models won't use everything, but they'll figure out what's important. For companies that have floors and floors of data scientists, my hat's off to you. Not everybody's in that place. And there are some terrific Snowflake partners that can add a lot of leverage. AWS has certainly got, a roster of things. But then Data Robot, if you haven't checked them out, have a very interesting platform. There's a lot of native integrations with Snowflake. And, for a data scientist of, at whatever level of maturity, they can run really fast and hard at a lot of these models using Data Robot platform. So all these things kind of come together. So want to put that up there. Okay, let's go to the next one. I think it's still worth noting that, with more data, that's great, but it's not a data without a design, and it's not a data without a purpose. And so, if we're like looking at, where does the time go, we're probably going to spend a little bit less time on the pain and suffering of getting data and testing data, and spending a little bit more time on the design of it and how well it's positioned to really answer some of these, existing and emerging business questions. I think, end users will continue to need help finding, where the data is. And I think that with this greater footprint of data available to them, there's an opportunity to really help them understand where it comes from, what it means, and how they can best leverage that. And then ultimately, these efforts should build and maintain trust in the data and in the team that supports it. And so these things are, if you're not firing on all cylinders on these things, having more data is good, but may not fully produce the outcomes that you're hoping for. So hopefully, these are evergreen themes. These are not new, but it's, I think, worth noting. For folks that are focused on these things and believe in them, but maybe finding themselves resource constrained, I would be remiss not saying, call us at DOS42. We're here to help. Sales pitch on, off. But okay, let's move on. Next slide. A little bit of a Frostbite recap if you hadn't checked it out earlier. We partnered up with Snowflake on a churn metrics use case, And we leveraged our experience across several media entertainment customers on this particular challenge, each one of them approaching it from a slightly different viewpoint. So we were able to blend, like what Marlene was talking about earlier, our own kind of like perspective on what people were doing that was pretty interesting into something that really sort of highlighted, what we think is kind of a best practice around sort of churn. We leveraged the actual media data cloud data as part of this solution, and then mocked up subscriber data. It's not actual subscriber data, but it works fine in the demo. So no actual customer data was used there, but we did bring those together. It's a working demo with Tableau, and would definitely encourage you to check out the Frostbite, but there's much more to it than the Frostbite in 10 minutes is going to show you. So again, that's something where, reach out to Snowflake, reach out to DOS. We're both happy to help you do a much deeper dive into how that was designed and, everything underneath the covers that goes into that. And if you want to watch the Frostbite that was released earlier today, we'll share the link later, but just go to the Media Data Cloud site, register, and you'll get the link to see the video.
And just to your point there, I like what you said earlier, the kind of blend of the different approaches that DOS 42 has seen with some of the major media publishers and their kind of approach to analytics. And I think we both really wanted, a said media company to come out and tell their story specifically, but, they're very tied to the chest and kind of their secret sauce, their approach and how they go about the analytics. But I think the beauty of, we didn't necessarily have a customer was comfortable to share their secret sauce, but showing the blend and how you guys consulted with our Frostbite team to show what is possible. But we really know behind that what's possible, the visual, that's actually what is happening, how these companies are competing, which was great. So
yeah, and just to piggyback on that, that's one of the things that just continues to keep me engaged in data and analytics is that, that personal and cultural like footprint or fingerprint on the way people approach stuff. That I use the term best practices very sparingly, because people, if this was a client driven demo, you'd be like, it's Disney and this is the way we approach it. It was amazing, but your business may be starkly different and it may not be quite plug and play. And we did find a little bit of an opportunity to be like, these are all good ideas. Like everybody should be doing them, and let's present them equally. So looking forward, definitely, if you're a Snowflake customer, you should be checking out what's available to you. There's definitely a way to dip your toe in the water and see what's available. But I think there's past that, a fairly fast route to activation. And as I was mentioning earlier, you've got your ML models today. If you are a data scientist, this should be sparking some ideas. If you're not, you should say, hey, this is an opportunity to connect up and what can we ideate around where we could go and where we think there's some blind spots, or again, just sort of look at what's available to us. This can be very much driven by the partnership side of the house, the analytics side of the house, stewardship side of the house. But the marriage of these technologies, I think, is really, really potent. And then, as I was sort of mentioning, approach, somebody that you think might be a sponsor for this internally. Like, I think, this is part and parcel of your remit. What do you think about this? Let's talk. Let's see what we can do and how that fits in with our goals for 2022. All right, and bonus. I thought I'd put some more stuff in here. We talked a lot about churn, but I think that, there's, even with the data that is in the marketplace today, and it's growing as we speak, there are other very, very obvious to me, like use cases in yield management, in the accessing of data or sharing of data, upfronts and new fronts, if that's the kind of business you're in, coming more from a TV and cable perspective. Anybody that's further sort of in a partner operations kind of capacity where you're working with a constellation of partners and have certain contractual terms that you need to work with, or in content distribution capacity. This is this is pain and suffering very intimately and can make your life quite a bit easier. Campaign optimization, that going back to like, what have you done for me lately? Like, okay, like I can do more. I can do more. There's a lot more data that will give me a lot more insights into where things are performing and shuffle things around to get the best value for the dollar. And then of course, pricing and planning. I know that relates to upfronts and new fronts a bit, but that is also an ongoing discipline within the organization. And certainly, given the wealth of data, can make a much richer decision on how to position and find available inventory that make sense for a given client, how to price it, how to package it, all those type of things. So very exciting times. Okay, I think that is my last slide.
And Ben, on the use cases, it's really for us, the maturation in our data marketplace team at Snowflake, who I work really closely with, is all driven specifically by use cases, right? So like, the digital marketplaces that we're all familiar with just audience data and enrichment data, I think that's been done. That's not as exciting to me personally. It's really kind of these additional use cases, which is emerging new data sets. And we're talking about organizations that weren't even traditionally monetizing data, right? We know who the Experians and the Axions and the Epsilons of the world are, kind of like your blue chip, data enrichment type companies. But I get really excited about just how the space is evolving overall when you think about, media and retail emerging, right? And companies like, Instacart and GoPuff bringing really interesting CPG and retail data into the space that's really giving other companies not necessarily a run for their money, but it's an ingestion of new data sets that's very exciting. And then what you said earlier, these companies are packaging that because they also don't have floors and floors of data scientists. So they're packaging that data with ML and AI with kind of the easy button, so to speak, on data applications and services. And I think that's really the next generation that we're going to see. It's not just the raw data assets, it's the data to support a use case that's already packaged up. And these are a lot of the, projects and stuff that we're really engaged with across media and advertising and entertainment with Snowflake and DOS 42 clients, a lot of those logos that they showed earlier.
Fantastic.